Hello, everyone, and welcome to the number one liquid-fueled, liquid lubricated show on the interwebs. This is the Whiskey Musings Broadcast, and I am your happier than a puppy with two Peters host, Rick. Why am I so happy? Well, let me explain. Pride Month ended yesterday, but it ended not with a whole bunch of stuff about pride. It ended with a with a series of constitutionally protected orders from the Supreme Court. It was fabulous, and let me tell you, it got to the point where, believe me, Twitter. I know you guys sometimes get upset about me talking about Twitter all the time. But let me just tell you that Twitter just melted down so bad that I actually had to uninstall the app and reinstall it in order to get it to work. It was amazing. It was just fantastic. They had so much to talk about that they couldn't figure out what to talk about first. And it was shocking to see the level of craziness that went on with the whole thing. It was so glorious. I mean, if you thought it was bad enough when the Dobbs decision overruled Roe versus Wade, we had three major decisions come down all on a Friday, and it was fantastic. Again, Twitter actually is even like trying to catch up now, because there's a lot of people that are now complaining about Twitter. And in fact, Elon Musk has been posting a bunch of stuff about how he's putting limits on people's viewership and sending stuff out, and thinks he's been kind of updating things throughout the day, mainly just because of the fact that I really think the bots were completely out in force once these decisions came down. And I'm going to get into these decisions here tonight. I'm going to talk a little bit about them and everything else coming up. First of all, I have to say thank you to everybody who has come in and is watching me early. Yes, I started 2 hours early tonight because I do have a work thing, and I definitely did not want to miss broadcasting tonight because I had missed last week. So thank you very much for being accommodating and coming in and watching a little bit early. I do appreciate that. I'm hoping that these are probably going to be the last ones, but again, stuff happens. I got to give a shout out to Barb over on Facebook. Thank you for coming. And yes, I see that you finally got the notification. She's coming in from a farm in Ohio. And of course, we have the usual band of malcontents and miscreants, the Whiskey Warriors over on Rumble. And I'm telling you, folks, if you haven't signed up for Rumble yet, you really, really should. In fact, I got hit by a hater on social media who looked up my YouTube page, and they were like, "Hey, the YouTube page, you don't have a lot of views." And I'm kind of like, well, yeah, that's because YouTube is full of people just like you who don't want to listen to my content. Anyway, Rumble is the place to be if you are a freedom and free speech loving American. Head on over to Rumble. Get yourself an account. It is free. Sign up. And of course, subscribe to the Whiskey Musings Broadcast, or follow, I think is what they call it. Follow the Whiskey Musings Broadcast. And I do see, I see a couple more people are popping in over on Facebook. I see Mark is over there. And of course, Outlaw Dogs being one of my Whiskey Warrior welcome wagons. She's jumped over there to say hello to a few people. So I do appreciate that. And of course, I see Music Man, Buddy Weiser, Redford, Rachel. Oh, all I can't even name all of the people over on Rumble. Like I'm saying, Rumble is where the party is at. I'm telling you, people, Rumble is where the party is at. So go ahead on over there. All right, let me move on really quick. Tonight, I am drinking Buffalo Trace. Don't worry, folks. You do see the tail end of the bottle, but don't worry. I already have a replacement in the wings waiting for me to finish this bottle here. And of course, it is in the Lucky Shot We the People glass with the nice little bullet on the side. I think it might be like a 308 or something like that. I'm not exactly sure in terms of size, but in the shot glass, or in the glass, it's not in the shot glass because it's not a shot glass, but it's in the glass. Anyway, so Buffalo Trace is what I'm drinking tonight. Good stuff, Kentucky bourbon right there, let me tell you. All right, so let's move on to tonight's sponsor, affiliate, whatever you want to call them. And of course, oh, wait, what is going on here? Why did that not work? Interesting. What's going on here? There it is. Okay. Well, that's strange. Huh. I must have pressed it too quickly or something. Anyway, all right. So tonight, of course, we're talking about the Institute on the Constitution. The Institute on the Constitution was established in 2004 as a 501c3 nonprofit with one singular mission: to restore the constitutional republic through grassroots education. All courses and materials are developed using primary source documents and taught from the American view of law and government as defined in the Declaration of Independence in the following 3 key points. 1, there is a God. 2, our rights come from him. And 3, the purpose of civil government is to secure and protect our God-given rights. The IOTC offers the opportunity to educate yourself on our most precious founding document, the Constitution of the United States, which reigned supreme yesterday. Yay! But the Constitution of the United States, they also provide tools to educate your community and get involved with local government. Start by taking their free U.S. Constitution course and go from there. Use my affiliate link, iotc.whiskeymusings.online, to sign up. And while you are there, take a moment to look through their other course material and information. My affiliate link, once again, is iotc.whiskeymusings.online to get great content to learn about our historical founding and support the show in the process. That's iotc.whiskeymusings.online. Or if you just want to purchase this fabulous Saddleback leather-bound U.S. Constitution to support the show, go to constitution.whiskeymusings.online. This is a great keepsake. It is 1/8 of an inch leather. The pages inside are water resistant, and look at that binding. It is stitching that goes all the way through the leather. They have a 100-year warranty on this, meaning that if this thing fails due to materials and workmanship, they will either fix it or replace it for free. As always, this is buddy tested, buddy approved, and works really well for those younger folks, like my youngest whiskey warrior. I'm hoping that he's out there. By the way, he got his purple belt in, I think it was karate, but one of the martial arts, just recently. But it is buddy approved. It's music approved. It's approved by Boy Scouts who are getting their merit badges, and so on and so forth. So, hey, head on over to constitution.whiskeymusings.online and pick one of those up today. You can pass it down for generations. It's a great stocking stuffer too. And it is fantastic. So support the Institute on the Constitution. They are doing great work there for spreading the word about the Constitution, like I'm trying to do every single episode as much as I possibly can. Speaking about that, tonight tonight we are going to be talking a lot about the Constitution and what happened with the Supreme Court on Friday. But, of course, we need to move on to our next segment, which is On This Day in American History. And, of course, this is a On This Day in American History. It is my Saturday segment where I read from the American Patriots Almanac. It is a fantastic book by William J. Bennett and John T.E. Cribb. It is chock full of all sorts of little factoids about our founding and some of the things that happened in the creation of this country. It also has a bunch of other facts and figures and things like that for all kinds of stuff. Love the book. It is absolutely great. If you can go and get it, go ahead and get it and have it around, or just listen to me. Because I read from it every Saturday. And of course, today is July 1st, and tonight's story is about Cesar Rodney's ride. In 1999, the U.S. Mint launched a series of quarters honoring the 50 states. The back of the Delaware quarter, which was the first in the series, featured a man in a tri-corner hat on a galloping horse. That rider is Cesar Rodney, one of Delaware's 3 signers of the Declaration of Independence. Rodney was a well-to-do planter who had served in Delaware's legislature, led protests against the stamp tax, and organized patriot militia before being elected to the Continental Congress. Despite such activity, he was a man of poor health. He suffered from asthma as well as skin cancer that left his face so disfigured he often hid one side of it behind a green silk scarf. Yet, as John Adams noted, there was fire, spirit, wit, and humor in his countenance. Rodney was in Delaware on the evening of July 1st, 1776, when he received an urgent message from Philadelphia. Congress was ready to vote on the issue of independence. Of the 2 other Delaware delegates, one favored and one opposed a break with England, so Rodney's vote would decide which way the colony would go, if he could get there in time. He rode through the night in thunder and rain to cover the 80 miles to Philadelphia. The next day, just as Congress prepared to vote, the delegates heard hoofbeats on the cobblestones, and a mud-spattered Rodney strode into the hall, still wearing his spurs, exhausted but ready to break the tie in his state's delegation by voting for independence. On July 2nd, 1776, the Continental Congress made the momentous decision to break from England. Resolved that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states. 2 days later, it adopted the Declaration of Independence. That is today's story on this day in American history from the American Patriots Almanac. Now, it's kind of interesting to read something like that it was a very close decision, because we didn't actually have close decisions in the Supreme Court cases. And so we'll get to those in just a minute. But before I do, I just want to say that I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm kind of thankful that June is over with. The American Pride Month hashtag that I had, thank you very much for coming in to social media and jumping on the bandwagon and helping to push that hashtag all through the month of June. It was incredible because of the fact that, we had a lot of, not as much as I would like, but I'm sure it's out there, but we had a lot of people that joined in and were posting photos and pictures and gifs of the American flag the entire month, because of the fact that we really need to push back on these things. And that is my first article for tonight. which is right here. Biden admin used Pride Month to plaster Christian countries with pride flags, but not Muslim ones. This comes from the Daily Caller. And it is kind of interesting to think about because of the fact that they have, they've been pushing this down. And honestly, this article sort of, in the headline sort of hits me in the proper place today, because on Twitter, I had a conversation. I'll call it a conversation, but I had a back and forth with somebody who basically was saying that the Christian religion was one of the least tolerant religions out there. And, I kind of shook my head and was like, okay, I don't understand where your thought process was. And they brought up, of course, the 10 Commandments, and meaning the first commandment saying that, thou shalt not have any gods before me. And I pretty much basically said that, well, that pretty much just means that if you follow any of the Christian religions, or even Judeo-Christian religions, if you really want to follow it, it doesn't necessarily reference that you're not supposed to worship others, although that's the point. But it doesn't mean that you can force others to follow your religion, and it doesn't mean that it's intolerant of other religions. It basically just says that if you are of a belief in God, that there can't be another God in that place, meaning that you can't worship Buddha and God at the same time. That's kind of what that meant. And so this person was using this as a cause to essentially say that the Christian religion is unrelenting. And that is just not true. And here's the reason why I say that. If you look at this article and you look at how the Biden admin was focused on things like Pride Month, if we as Christians in the Judeo-Christian belief were very intolerant, we would be doing a lot more when it comes to the month of Pride. So, for the most part, especially here in the Western world and on top of this, especially in America, we actually sit here and think to myself that, we sit and think to ourselves realistically that it's better that we're just look, let me live the way I want to live and you can live the way you want to live. And as long as we kind of agree on a basic foundational aspects of law and order and things like that, we usually can get along. And so that, generally speaking, is a pretty tolerable kind of place. But at the same time, if you were gay, and this is a fact, if you were gay and went to a Muslim, a seriously Muslim country, you would get killed. And so I don't understand how, and this is just proof of it, where, the Biden administration doesn't want to post or put up pride flags in countries of the Muslim religion. Why? If Muslim and if Islam is very tolerant, then why would the Biden administration specifically exclude those countries? Well, I mean, the simple answer is they really are not that tolerant, for the most part, at least. And keep in mind, I'm not trying to blanket the entire thing. I'm sure there are some sects that are very, very religious, very, very tied to Islamic law. And then there's other sects that might, just like with the Christian religion, there's some sects that are really orthodox, very, very proper, very specific about what they do. And then there's others that are a little loosey-goosey. But generally speaking, this whole idea that in terms of Christians in particular are not tolerant versus other religions, that just blew my mind that somebody would actually even think that way. But again, and this is typical. This typically happens in our country whenever June comes around. Our government decides to go ahead and put up this flag, and So anyway, I brought this up on another episode as to whether or not this could be a religion, and it was kind of interesting in conversing with somebody on the social media sphere. about the decisions, one of the things that they were talking about, which is the biggest one. Well, I mean, okay. Before I tell you that story, let me just go ahead and jump right into this. Obviously, the Supreme Court went ahead, and this is a headline from Just the News. Supreme Court strikes at the heart of regulatory state with rulings on free speech, religion, and education. And so the conversation that I was having, just to kind of tie this in, had to deal with, of course, the decision on the web designers case. And the thing about it is that, they were talking about how, now, according to the court, we can, religious people can now discriminate. And one of the points that I wanted to make, which is fairly apropos, is I actually know of a barber within my town that is Muslim. And this gentleman came over here. Obviously, he spends time both here and back in the Middle East in his home country. He kind of goes back and forth, but he runs a barbershop here. Nice guy, pretty nice, and that kind of thing. I've had my hair cut by him. But when I don't really that much anymore, but when I did, one of the first things when I first met him, one of the first things that he said is, as we walked in, because it was me and my wife and my son, as we walked in, he made the comment that, I'm sorry, I can't cut women's hair. It's against my religion. And this in particular is kind of the crux of the case that the Supreme Court took up. So the thing about it is with this particular case is, it's against his religion to cut women's hair. Okay. And, just like any other American, we just, that thinks and feels the way I do, we just kind of accepted it and said, okay, well, that's fine. No big deal. I'll frequent here, obviously, as a man at a barbershop, which most barbershops are for men. They're not salons, which are for the ladies. But the thing about it is, he was upfront and honest with us, and hey, I'll respect that. That's a matter of his religion, but there's no reason why we should be going around in a country that is supposed to be free. There's no reason that we should be going around and, forcing people to do what they are not allowed to do based on their religious beliefs. And that's kind of the crux of the matter when it came to one of the Supreme Court cases that was that had popped up. And so give me just a second. I got to find this thing because I unfortunately. Okay, so that's the Postmaster General one. So, well, this is part of it. This is actually part of it. This is one of the cases that came up, was in regards to a petitioner. His name was Gerald Groff. He's an evangelical Christian who believes that for religious reasons that Sunday should be devoted to worship and rest. And this particular individual, Title VII of our code. And Buddy keeps asking me which religion. All I know is he said he was Muslim. I'm guessing it was, either Sunni or Shiite because he came from Iraq. So it could have been either one of them. Didn't really get into it, to be honest with you. So anyway, back to this particular case, one of the two that happened to kind of cover religion, was the fact that, this gentleman who works for the Postal Service wanted to have Sundays off. And because he wanted to have Sundays off, he essentially was denied that because, of course, the Postal Service now runs other, on Sundays and stuff. But anyway, the point being is that he, under Title VII of our U.S. code, which is our federal laws, under Title VII, they are, businesses are supposed to make every reasonable accommodation that they possibly can. And apparently unless, and there is a thing, unless the business, the business would be subjected to undue hardship. Now, undue hardship's kind of a vague thing, but the point is that he, this gentleman was asking for Sundays off, and the thing about it is that the business would have to prove under Title VII that this particular individual could not be reasonably accommodated, meaning that they could not have a replacement come and service their route. And so essentially what ended up happening is he won the case, and which, I mean, that just makes sense. There's just no way that one letter carrier can't be replaced with another letter carrier. Really, really interesting with regards to that. But anyway, that wasn't like the major one that caused a lot of people pain. Okay. The one that did, though, and let me just close this out. The one that did, as soon as I can find it, because let's see, which one is this? Nope, that's not it. Gotta go one more. Here we go. Okay. So the one that is causing people heartache, and let me go ahead and switch over to it. Let's see, this one. Here we go. All right. So this one gets to the big crux and heart of the matter. Okay. So this was 303 Creative LLC, which essentially is a business run by a lady out in Colorado. And she does web designs specifically for websites. Okay. And the thing about it is that she essentially pointed out, this is a graphic design business, and she essentially pointed out that, hey, I don't have a problem working with people who are, gay, lesbian, whatever, the LGBTQ alphabet crowd, plus minus divided by sign, whatever it is. She was like, I don't have a problem working with them, but I am not going to promote marriage as an acceptable thing, because to her and her religion, she doesn't believe in same-sex marriage, which, realistically, anyone who reads the Bible understands that same-sex marriage is not condoned as a part of the Bible. And so, so what they ended up doing, okay, is she went to the Colorado, the CADA is what they call it. And that's the Colorado Anti-Discrimination Act is the particular thing. Now, to clarify this, all right, there are a lot of people who are on the left who are like, well, this person was granted a case and they haven't even been asked by a gay couple to do this work. So why are they even being granted a case? Well, folks, this was a hypothetical question, first of all, because of the fact that it challenged a law that was in place. The courts decided that if she were to, if the law was actually enforced on her, that she would have potentially been harmed by this law, which again, if you remember when I was talking about standing, this is one of the key points in standing within the court. So it doesn't matter whether it's a hypothetical or not. It doesn't matter whether or not the people have actually contracted with her to do this. She was preemptively asking the question and basically saying, hey, can I do this? And so what ended up happening here is the case went through the court system and got all the way to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court essentially said, hey, you know what? This is a good case. We're going to take it. And it's largely based off of the First Amendment. Now, there is some conversation versus the speech angle versus the religious angle. And the Supreme Court decided to go through the speech angle. All right. So the suppression of creative speech is what it is. And so anyway, The point is that the Colorado law prohibits all public accommodations from denying the full and equal enjoyment of its goods and services to any customer based on his or her race, creed, disability, sexual orientation, or other statutorily, I can't even say that, enumerated trait. Okay. Now, the law itself defines public accommodation broadly to include pretty much almost everybody's public-facing business, almost every single public-facing business in the state. Now, here's the thing, okay? When she got to the district court, she literally stated that she is willing to work with all people, regardless of classifications, okay, and will gladly create custom graphics and websites for clients of any sexual orientation. But specifically, she will not produce content that contradicts what she considers biblical truth, regardless of who owns it or who asks for it. Okay? Her belief is that marriage is between one man and one woman, and it is a sincerely held conviction, which, if you recall, when I was talking about the possibility of pride being a religion, that's one of the tests. Is it a sincerely held conviction by this person? That's one of the religious tests, okay? But anyway, so she provides design services that are, expressive, etc. So in other words, if she were approached by a gay couple and wanted to celebrate something else, like a birthday or whatever, essentially what would happen is she would go ahead and make that up. But if they said, hey, we want you to make our wedding website, our marriage website, that's a problem. And so this is where it's, kind of a very narrow sort of application in this case. And the Supreme Court sided with Mrs. Smith. So they essentially said that the First Amendment prohibits Colorado from forcing a website designer to create expressive designs speaking messages with which the designer disagrees. In other words, what they're saying is, if I don't like the message of Nazism, I cannot be forced to create any kind of artwork or, in this case, web design or anything else that supports Nazism. Okay? And that's essentially what this is saying. All right. And the problem is that everybody is like focused on this and thinking, oh, well, this just allows a person who, a religious right, who just wants to, let's say they don't like black people. And so they don't want to create anything for a black person. Well, that's not what this thing is saying. This is basically saying that as long as you're not denying the entire service, that there are certain things that you cannot be forced into doing. This is called, freedom of expression, creative expression and stuff. Okay. And they called out a bunch of things where they were talking about how the free speech clause of the First Amendment, to protect the freedom to think as you will and to speak as you think. And they called out things like the Boy Scouts of America versus Dale, and Whitney versus California, and a bunch of other things that they are talking about. So essentially, because of the fact that she wasn't like, well, I won't do anything for black people, period, but that she was very specific and said, I'll do things for people who do that. I just won't do weddings. And see, this is where this is going to open up the door to a lot of different things. I'm going to tell you that. I'm going to tell you that for sure. This is going to open up the door to a lot of different things that has been broadly, applied in the past. And now we're starting to get to some specifics. This was the same general kind of ruling that came with the cake baker. Because again, what a lot of people don't understand is with the cake baker, he was like, look, they can come in my shop. They can buy cakes. I'll sell them cakes. But I personally will not put on any kind of custom specific writing that violates my beliefs, my sincerely held religious beliefs. And it's the same, in my opinion, this is the exact same thing as that barber that's in my town. I can't force him to cut my wife's hair, not that I would ever want to, but I can't force him to do that. And neither can the government, because that is a religious expression, and that is an expression of free speech. It is a practice of his religion. You cannot do this, and that's what this decision basically states. And so, again, the Twitter sphere is like all blowing up about, blacks are going to get, and and in fact, there was a picture, I wish I had it, but there was a picture that popped up that essentially stated, there was apparently a business somewhere, don't know where, that put up, okay, so because based on the recent Supreme Court decision, I am going to refuse to service anyone who wears a MAGA hat, is a Trump supporter, et cetera, et cetera. But if you are a church who happens to support the pride, then we're fine. Then come on in. And of course I responded back and I'm like, well, okay, go ahead, but we'll see how well that's going to work. And that's the thing, is that a lot of people really don't understand is that freedom is freedom. There's things that you can do. For an example, just like Bud Light, people do not have to go to your business. Okay. If you decide as a business, well, I'm not going to support, whatever it is, doesn't really matter. It's kind of in the same line. If you think about it from a strictly, black and white kind of perspective, it's sort of like the, no shoes, no shirt, no service kind of thing. If you're not wearing shoes, if you're not wearing a shirt, you don't get any service. And granted, some people argue, well, that's more of a health thing. It kind of depends on where you're going, especially in places like restaurants and stuff. But the thing here is that, if you are a business and you support certain things and you're against others, I mean, if you're going to force pride stuff like Starbucks and the rest have been doing for years now, then I have the right to walk away and not put my money toward your business. Same thing goes with you. If you don't like the fact that I might be a Christian-based organization or a Christian-based business, you can walk away too. But I can guarantee you in terms of the population, okay, you're in the minority if you're part of the second class. Anyway, so they also pointed out, now this one's going to be very interesting because this opinion opens up the door for some interesting things, okay? And here's the quote. I've got it highlighted here. I know it's probably not that big, but I've got it highlighted here. Speech conveyed over the internet, like all other manner of speech, qualifies for the First Amendment's protections. And the court agrees with the 10th Circuit ruling that wedding websites Mrs. Smith seeks to create involve her speech, a conclusion supported by the parties' stipulations, including that Mrs. Smith intends to produce a final story for each couple using their own words and original artwork. Now, the key point here is they state in this opinion, speech conveyed over the internet, like all other manner of speech, qualifies for the First Amendment's protections. That sentence is key because now we have the court essentially saying that speech, just like mine right here, what I'm doing right now, if YouTube goes and shuts me off because of something that I said, now we have an opinion that essentially states that my speech over the internet qualifies for First Amendment protections. Now, the question, of course, in this particular case is going to be whether or not, because I can go to places like Rumble or Twitter or Twitch or any of these other outlets, whether or not YouTube would have a responsibility to have to keep my channel up if they decide that I'm violating things. I think that would be a bit of a stretch. But if I was to go and get blocked by everyone, that would be a problem. So this is very, very good. This is good for the country, regardless of what all the leftist idiots are going to say about this. This is incredibly good for the country. Now, let's go on to the next one, which is severely, the biggest one that actually has them completely. I mean, just believe me, everybody is freaking, going nuts and gaga over this one. So let me find it. Let's see, which one is it? This is okay. Here we go. Biden versus Nebraska. All right. So this one here, which also came out on Friday, has to deal with the Higher Education Act of 1965, which governs federal financial aid mechanisms, including student loans. Okay. So this one has everybody up in arms. This one and the next one that I'm going to talk about has everyone up in arms. So here's the thing. Okay. And this is 100% what the entire thing was about. All right. First of all, Biden tried to use the Secretary or the Higher Education Act of 1965 along with the HEROES Act. When was the HEROES Act put in? He tried to use the HEROES Act. That's of 2003. So he tried to use the HEROES Act as well as the Higher Education Act of 1965 in order to basically say that, hey, I have the authority under these two acts to go ahead and just eliminate a certain amount of debt. And what he was doing is he was pushing the Secretary of Education, because the Secretary of Education under both of those acts does have some ability to modify the situation within the act because of the fact that Congress went ahead and wrote that in. But what Biden is saying is, hey, if you have the authority to go ahead and do the modifications, let's just modify it and give it to everybody. Well, the Supreme Court basically said that not going to happen. And the reason being is because of the fact that they literally stated that by him granting the amount of money, which has been considered and estimated to be somewhere around $430 billion, billion with a B, and affect nearly everyone, okay, that was considered a major change in the law, not a minor change, not a administrative change. And so therefore, Biden could not do it as a part of this setup, the Higher Education Act of 1965 and the HEROES Act of 2003. Couldn't do it. All right. But here's the thing, and this is what I've been telling people on social media. You need to understand this. And it is clearly put out in this wonderful book called The Constitution of the United States. In fact, it's not even a book. It's like barely 12 pages or something like that. I mean, it's really not that big. But here's the thing, is that Biden cannot, according to the Constitution, use executive orders to change the laws as they are written. He found this out, which I don't understand why he keeps doing this, but he found this out with the whole OSHA thing and the shots, okay? And essentially what happens is, so executive orders, and I've even talked about this in a past episode, I don't remember what it is, but executive orders literally are administrative ways to apply laws. The executive branch is to do one thing: execute and enforce the laws that the legislative branch under Article 1 of the Constitution, which is the Congress, put together. So basically, Congress essentially says, here's what we want you to do. And here's your limits. Here's what this covers. This is how we want it applied, or this is the thing that we want done. Executive orders supplement that by enacting those laws, by saying, hey, in order to get this done, we have to do X, Y, and Z. But here's the thing. The executive cannot change the overarching law that is applied. And that's essentially what this opinion is essentially saying, is that the secretary, by trying to apply it to everybody, and because of the fact that it changed the fact that he was going to cancel $430 billion in debt principal, that this violates the separation of powers and, believe it or not, the power of the purse that Congress holds exclusively. So he cannot in any way, shape, or form use executive orders to go ahead and do this. Now, there were two cases that actually got wrapped up into one. One of them, they said that the person who brought it realistically didn't have standing, but that they were going to sort of lump it in because of the fact that it dealt with the HEROES Act and things like that. But the thing about it is that he cannot, or the president cannot just make a wide sweeping executive order to change a law that's on the books. Now, here's the key, though, is that all of these Democrats are coming out and saying, we've got to cancel student debt. We've got to cancel student debt. Well, you know what? There is an actual legal way to do it. It's called create a congressional statute that cancels the student debt. Well, that was actually done properly for the PPP loans. Several people got excused or absolved from the PPP loans. And so what you find out is that the PPP loans were actually absolved by congressional statute. They modified and forgave it, not Biden. So the problem here, honestly, as far as the student loan debt cancellation, has nothing to do with whether or not it's legal to cancel the debt. Like Nancy Pelosi is very fond of, or is very well, at least for I have a meme on her saying it. The president cannot cancel the debt. The president can postpone it because that's a part of his executive privilege. Yes, because he is enforcing the law. He is executing the law, but he can't just change the law and cancel the debt. Now, granted, Pelosi said that with regards to Trump and COVID, but the fact of the matter is that she's right. Unless Congress were to go and create a law that would cancel this debt, which, by the way, is very unpopular. That's part of the reason why the leftists in the Congress are trying to get Biden to do it, because they are attempting to do an end run around the Constitution. And as expected, as I've told you, as I've said in multiple social media posts, it is unconstitutional for him to do. Doesn't matter. Now, he's not done with this, by the way. And I got a little bit on that here in just a moment. But he's not done with this. He is still pushing to try and get this thing pushed through. And he is looking at other possibilities on pushing this through. So, now the last one that I have here is in regards to the, affirmative action, statute. Okay. And then I'll circle back to him pushing elsewhere for the other stuff. But here is the affirmative action one. So Harvard College and the University of North Carolina, the two that were brought in, okay, they're two of the oldest institutions in the United States. And tens of thousands of students, apparently, according to the opinion here, apply to the school. Obviously, they can't take all 10,000, so they have to back off. All right. but they have to use an admissions process in order to decide who gets accepted into the school and who doesn't. Now, both admissions to both schools can depend on a student's grades, recommendation letters, extracurricular involvement, but it also can include their race. And the question being presented is whether or not the admission systems of Harvard and UNC are lawful under the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. So this was focused directly on the Equal Protection Clause and the 14th. All right. Now, the thing is that under the 14th, there are some carve-outs, and there have been carve-outs in the use of race as a consideration. However, the key for it is that that cannot be a negative consideration. And because of the way that Harvard and the University of North Carolina were actually using race as a key factor to determine whether or not the acceptance from year to year to year changed ethnically in terms of their admissions process, this is where the problem came into play. And the other thing that's really, really bad is the fact that these people don't seem to understand that this was on a year-by-year basis, that the schools were actually using race as a key factor to decide whether or not people were getting in, and that the honest fact is that this case was brought by an Asian person. This was an Asian individual who got denied, even though he had a 3.9 GPA, and supposedly got great grades in school, obviously, for 3.9. And he applied and got denied, basically because he was maybe the 10th out of, whatever Asian. And so they cut him off. So anyway, the question here realistically boils down to a couple of things. And I kind of highlighted this. It goes through a bunch of, again, you can look these up, by the way. I put in the opinions page for the Supreme Court. You can pull these down, and you can pull these down and read through these. It does tend to get a little monotonous if you're not into legalese, but there were a couple of cases in particular that they were focused on. And one of the cases is called the Bakke case, or Bakke case, whatever it is. Anyway, the Bakke case, or the Bakke case, was the one that actually kind of started the whole idea of doing race-based admissions to ensure diversity. But the thing about it is that case really kind of set up a hard problem in terms of determining how whether or not the case itself was bindingly present, or a binding precedent. And so there was another case called GETTR and Bollinger that was brought, and it was the first time that the Supreme Court actually supported and qualified what the Bakke case kind of was saying. And so Justice Powell, who was the consenting, or the what do they call it? Yeah, the consenting opinion, wrote the consenting opinion in the Bakke case. His view was that student body diversity is a compelling state interest that can justify the use of race in university admissions. In other words, he's saying that, hey, diversity is kind of important when it comes to our universities. But the GETTR versus Bollinger case started, or kind of followed that line, but also said that there should be limits on those, that they can't just use race as like the deciding factor, but that other factors have to be put in. And the reason why they added limits was because of the fact that it was intended to guard against two dangers with regards to race-based government action. The first is the risk that the use of race will devolve into illegitimate stereotyping, which is, again, the idea of the using race and turning it into where a person's race is actually a negative. Okay. And the other one, let's see, what was the other one? The other one was that race basically could not be used as would not be used as a plus, but as a negative. In other words, discriminating against racial groups that were not the beneficiaries of the race-based preference. Now, this is key because this is exactly what what a lot of the leftist lunatics that are out there are saying, because they're saying, oh, so you're just you're now discriminating against black people. And it's like, no, you're missing the point. Because of the fact this person was discriminated against, being an Asian person means that being the black person, that the use of race was a positive for them, but a negative for the Asian person. And that's not what our country is about. You can't use race as a requirement or a harmful requirement for anything. And that's the whole point in terms of like being white. I can't be discriminated against just because I'm white in favor of a black person. Well, that's pretty much what affirmative action actually is when you look at it for the basis of it. But here's the thing, is that the GETTR case actually imposed a limit on these race-based admission programs. And at some point, the court held when they agreed to the GETTR case, as a part of the opinion, they actually said that at some point these admissions must end. And here's where the crux of the problem comes in. And part of that opinion basically said that recognizing that enshrining a permanent justification for racial preferences would offend the Constitution's unambiguous guarantee of equal protection. The court expressed its expectation that in 25 years, the use of racial preferences will no longer be necessary to further the interest approved today. Now, I read through some of the responses of the judges at the time, like Sandra Day O'Connor and Ruth Bader Ginsburg, etc. But Ruth Bader Ginsburg actually said, I'm not quite sure that 25 years is going to be good enough. But the rest of them all agreed. The rest of them all said, yeah, by 25 years from now, we should be able to move past this. And so therefore, that's the time limit that should have been placed on these race-based admission programs. Well, turns out that this particular Supreme Court agreed that 25 years have passed since the GETTR decision. And there apparently is no end to race-based college admissions in sight. And the court has permitted race-based college admissions, but only within the confines of very narrow restrictions, such as admission programs must comply with strict scrutiny, may never use race as a stereotype or negative, and must at some point end. And that's the key. They must end. Now, both of the respondents, meaning Harvard and UNC, failed, according to the court, failed to each one of those criterias, and therefore their admissions, race-based admissions program is now invalidated under the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause. And that's essentially what's going on. See, these people the left doesn't seem to get it. Sooner or later, we're going to have to remove affirmative action. We're going to have to remove the idea that race, immutable characteristics, can be used as a part of deciding whether somebody gets put into, in this case, a college, or whether somebody gets a job. There's got to be a point where we let this go. And of course, the left can't do that, because if they do let it go, now they know they lose a lot of their voting base. They lose a lot of their constituents who believe that they are fighting for the little guy. If this gets taken away from the left, they can no longer use the idea of race and tell black people, well, Republicans are out to get you. Because if after this decision, it starts to show that blacks are getting into colleges a lot more than what they were under affirmative action, under these affirmative action programs, that totally blows their narrative out of the water. And that is exactly what they don't want, which is part of the reason why they have to keep these programs going in perpetuity. Perpetuity. There we go. In perpetuity. They have to keep this stuff going. And the fact of the matter is, here we are, we're in 2023. Okay. We're in 2023, or are we in 2024? I can't remember. Anyway, no, we're not in 2024 yet. We're in 2023. And the thing about it is that these people don't seem to get it. We have to let this go. Like Morgan Freeman has said multiple times, you want to stop racism? Stop talking about race. Don't call somebody a white man. Don't call me a black man. That's it. Get rid of it. Quit using immutable characteristics when describing somebody. Quit using immutable characteristics in terms of as a factor in terms of getting involved. Okay. When it comes to these kinds of acceptance programs or whatever. And this is what they were essentially, this is how they came out. So yeah, the programs, they basically said the programs lacked a logical endpoint. They fail with the equal protection clause's twin commands that race may never be used as a negative and that it may not operate as a stereotype. And yeah, they are, they require, apparently in terms of Harvard and UNC, they required stereotyping, which is what Grutter, the earlier case that supported race-based admissions, was cautious in basically saying. So there you go. I mean, that's ultimately where we're at here when it comes to this stuff. So again, those are the three cases that popped on Friday, and it was awesome. I mean, it was awesome to see. And even now they're still going on about it. And I'm still hitting up. I mean, Adam Schiff has been posting, Shifty Schiff, the jerkwad who really needs to just go away and fade off into historical obscurity out in California, has been talking about how, the student loan debt relief program has to happen. It's like, you know what? You guys could do it just like with freaking abortion, folks. I mean, there's arguments that can be made on abortion, but the point that I'm making is if Congress really wanted to support abortion, they would make a law and then run it through the courts and that kind of stuff. Same thing with student loan debt relief. If you actually wanted it to happen, then put together a law. Okay? Put it through Congress. Put it to a vote. They know they can't get it. They know they can't get the votes. And so what do? They try an end run around the Constitution, and they try to make the favorable administration of the basement dummy that we have get involved and try to make him the fall guy for all of this. Well, as I said, Biden is planning on trying to ignore the student debt ruling. And so he is, this article here in Hot Air, let me go ahead and we'll bring this up. Let's see where, yeah, here we go. So Biden, of course, immediately, as soon as the thing came down out of the Supreme Court, he held a press conference and was like, oh yeah, we're going to keep doing this. We're going to keep trying to fulfill a promise that he made that he knew he couldn't keep. But because he has to have those younger voters who have a very, very limited grasp of the Constitution and the way that our country actually works, he is essentially pushing even more. He's like trying to figure out, and he's got lawyers apparently trying to figure out how he can still get this done. So realistically, I don't see it happening, but I wouldn't necessarily put it past a court or whatever. So yeah, um, it's gonna be kind of interesting to see. He's still trying to use the Higher Education Act in order to get it done, and they're still looking at it and trying to figure it out. For those of you who think the HEROES Act, I mean, that applied directly to the military. So realistically, and actually the I looked into the Higher Education Act. There are limited things that uh, the superintendent can actually do. Or the secretary, sorry, not superintendent, but the secretary can actually do, and they are very specific reasons for forgiving student debt. So I honestly, I don't see how he's going to get around this, how he's going to try and get this thing done, but he'll keep pitching it because, and so will the left, because they've got to pander to their low IQ voters, to all those people out there who don't understand the Constitution and laws. He's got to pander to them. Anyway, so, all right, let me take a quick break here. I'm going to answer Music Man's question. Music Man says, hey, in the pet of the week, are you allowed to show children who are not mine? Well, here's the thing. So first of all, for those of you that don't understand, pet of the week is my Wednesday night, segment, just like my Saturday segment, but I have a pet of the week segment where you can submit your pet photos and give me their names, breeds, ages, whatever you want, and I will put them on the air as part of the segment. But to answer your question, Music Man, over on Rumble, I prefer not to have photos of kids, but if you send me a photo of a kid and there's no other, and a pet, and like their face isn't hidden, then I will probably blot it out, because I just don't, I don't like the idea of posting pictures of kids, even though legally I could probably get away with it because you sent it to me. I'm still not, I'm not going to do it. I won't post kids. If I have to, I'll go and like cut the photo or maybe blot the person's face out in some way. I just don't want to, I don't want to get into any legalese or legal issues, but hey, if you want, just as a kind of a side note, if you want to send me a picture for a pet of the week on Wednesday, you can go and send it to fans, fans fans at whiskeymusings.online. That's fans at whiskeymusings.online. Same thing goes for tonight. Usually I have a question of the week. I don't have one for tonight, which is good because this is a long episode. But I usually have a question of the week. So if you have a question, whether it's politics, social issues, current events, or even just a generic question, I don't care. You can send me a question also for questions for whiskey at that same address. All right. So Biden is trying to obviously ignore the student debt ruling. And I've already kind of covered this. So let's go up to the next one. Okay. So the funny thing in terms of the debt, remember I mentioned that meme that I have, of her. Well, the funny thing is that apparently the Supreme Court actually quoted Nancy Pelosi when she said it. And I just thought that was funny that they actually quoted, Chief Justice John Roberts, actually quoted former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi in the majority of opinion about it. So, okay. All right. Yeah, I'll answer your question here a little bit later. Okay. So anyway, there's still more that's going on here. Obviously, Biden vows that the fight's not over. I already kind of covered that. And liberals, I sort of talked about this. The liberals are outraged that now Asian students will finally get a fair chance. Actually, it's more than just Asian students. But it is, they, believe me, they melted down. I mean, they were completely melting down. In fact, there was a guy that came on and was like, hey, he was talking about veterans and, all this stuff about veterans forgiveness and all this other crap. And I just simply pointed out, well, Biden was trying to use the HEROES Act, which is specific to people in war. It was put in specifically for the Iraq War and those kinds of events that, you know, the military and veterans were having problems with, etc. And that was the whole point. And so, yeah, he blocked me pretty quickly on Twitter. I've had that happen a lot. I've had a lot of people blocking me on Twitter just because I hit them with facts. Okay. It's kind of funny, actually. I think it's hilarious in some cases. But here's one of the law of unintended consequences might come into play. And the real thing is that affirmative action, which is the diversity, equity, and inclusion and identity part of it, could actually be under strife now. And the reason being is because now that they've struck it down in college admissions, now they could be looking at something with regards to businesses. So we could be potentially looking at something here, which is actually pretty good for taking out affirmative action across the board. But we could actually be looking at a possibility here where people's merits and the meritocracy is what runs our country. Meaning that if you go and you are the best at what you do and you happen to be white, you can no longer be discriminated against because you are white, because they have to take another person in order to satisfy certain requirements within business. So this is opening up a Pandora's box, yes, but the Pandora's box is really actually a good thing in this particular case. We're going to have to watch this. We're going to have to watch and see what this ruling actually does toward the DEI. And as I was saying, here's another article with regards to the workplace affirmative action being next up after race is banned in college admissions. You know, the funny thing about it is the left keeps talking about how Martin Luther King gave his famous speech and he wanted people to be judged not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. Well, here we are, the Republicans trying to make that happen. Sort of like how we made slavery go away. That's interesting. But anyway, here we are trying to make that happen, trying to make America into the blind society that it actually was. And yes, Buddy Weiser does bring up a really good point. Affirmative actions are illegal under the Civil Rights Act. They actually are, if you read the Civil Rights Act and the way it is. And that's why there were some narrow opinions that the court pointed out with regards to things like, admissions and that kind of stuff. So I'm starting to think that, some of this DEI stuff and all this inclusion and everything else, it's getting to a point where I'll be honest with you. I don't want to know. I don't care what your skin color is. I don't care who you worship. And I certainly don't care who you sleep with or who you live with or who you perform sexual acts with, which is the ending of the Pride Month that we just had. I don't care about all that as long as you're not trying to force that crap on me. Okay. Yeah. Anyway. All right. So let's move on. One of the, in particular, I've said this before and I'll say it again. Our court makeup, our Supreme Court makeup, we have two strict constitutionalists in Thomas and Alito. We have a smattering of kind of middle of the road moderates with Roberts and Amy Coney Barrett and Kavanaugh and Gorsuch. And then we have three activists. Okay. So anyway, one of those activists, we just got hired, which was Ketanji Brown Jackson. And she actually had to recuse herself on the second from the second case that kind of got rolled into the first case, but she had to recuse herself there because of the fact that she actually was, there was some conflict of interest, which I'll be honest with you, I'm kind of surprised that happened because Sotomayor had a case, or no, it wasn't Sotomayor, it was Elena Kagan had a case where her publisher was brought up in front of the Supreme Court, and and she didn't recuse herself for conflict of interest. But anyway, sorry, I'm being told to take a drink by Outlaw Dogs, who has kind of become my de facto semi-producer. Anyway, so Sotomayor and Ketanji Brown Jackson both wrote dissenting opinions with a lot of these cases. And yeah, her dissent in the Christian Designer case kind of shows how literally stupid this is. Okay. She basically said in her dissent in the Christian case that the Pulse nightclub shooting was driven by anti-gay hate. She claimed that about the 2016 shooting at the Pulse gay nightclub in Orlando, Florida, was motivated by anti-gay prejudice. And the fact of the matter is that, and let me see, where is this at? Because I want to make sure I get this right. The FBI and other law enforcement, okay, despite Sotomayor's assertion, the FBI and other law enforcement were unable to verify the claims that Mateen was gay, frequented gay bars, or even knew that the Pulse nightclub was a gay bar. So in other words, they couldn't prove the motivations of this guy, and she went ahead and just said it outright. It was because he was anti-gay. This woman, I mean, if you've ever read any of her other opinions, dissenting opinions or whatever, she's a freaking activist. She is probably one of the dumbest justices that we have on the courts, next to Ketanji Brown Jackson, who I'll remind you could not identify what a woman is. Okay. But yeah, it's just she's these people, I'm telling you, it's just so bad. And of course, the left is saying that the court now is an activist court. And it's like, I keep telling people on social media, no, they're not. They're actually more where they're supposed to be. They're not an activist court. They're not an extremist court. They're actually supporting the Constitution. They are actually getting back to the constitutionality of things. And of course, you have the disgusting attacks, literally disgusting attacks on Justice Thomas, Clarence Thomas, and I think it's Gorsuch is the other one. But anyway, so yeah, I mean, I'm sorry if you just read either one of any of the decisions that were made. Ketanji Brown Jackson's was like 1,000 words, and the rest of the opinions were like maybe 300. It's just horrible. I mean, these people, yeah, I don't know. I don't even understand how they got on the court, to be honest with you. But yeah, it's just a mess. Just a mass mess. And speaking of mass messes, okay, there's a mass mess in the White House. Apparently, all of the talk about Hunter's legal woes are starting to cause some problems with Joe Biden, as it should. The reason being is because of all the stuff that's coming out about Hunter and his basically pay to play influence peddling schemes. In this case, he's basically telling all of the aides, hey, you got to get your hands off my family. Well, Joe, we'll take our hands off of your family when you've left the White House and are no longer significant in our issues. According to this article from Hot Air, it says Biden is consumed with Hunter's legal woes, tells aides, hands off my family. Biden is running for re-election, which of course this is going to cause just major headaches for him if he doesn't get it figured out. And his staffers are worried about the optics of Hunter Biden being attached at the hip to his father. given the recent deal announced that will keep him out of prison. In other words, the plea deal that he took. And there is the settlement with the mother of his 4-year-old daughter, who, by the way, they won't even allow to take the Biden name. In fact, Joe doesn't even acknowledge her. Yeah, it's just a mess. But anyway, Hunter Biden is getting, we all know he's getting, soft gloves and things like that. But anyway, so Hunter Biden is causing all kinds of problems for old Joe. And I'll be honest with you, as this goes on, especially as more and more stuff comes out about this, it makes me wonder if what I'm starting to hear rumors are true, that they are going to try and get rid of Joe in terms of running for 2024. And then somehow, and I haven't quite figured out how, but somehow get rid of Kamala Harris, because she obviously would be the heir apparent being the VP, but somehow get rid of both of them and put Gavin Newsom in as the 2024 primary contender against RFK Jr. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. RFK Jr. does have some points, but he also has said some things that are pretty damn wild. So yeah, yeah. Anyway, this is just ridiculous. And I keep going after and keep talking to people on Twitter. They keep saying, "Oh, tell me about Hunter Biden," and I keep attacking Hunter Biden. I do, because the Bidens are a crime family. They're a corrupt family. They're a criminal family. They should be out. Donald Trump has withheld so much more crap than these guys have ever done. There is so much more evidence against these guys, and there's hardly any evidence over Trump. But yet all of these leftists got their heads stuck up their keisters, and they seem to think that Donald Trump is the enemy here. No, Biden is clearly the problem. We have a corrupt criminal in the White House. And yeah, anyway. All right. Let's see. What else do we have? I know I've got just a few more minutes left here. You know how Biden launched this whole Bidenomics thing? And first of all, before I get into this, speaking of Bidenomics, Music Man, thank you so much for your Rumble rant. I do appreciate it. And Music Man says, thank you for your being awesome. Talk about the whiskey hat again. I am going to buy. Well, all right. So here's the thing about the hat. I still need to figure out, I've got some things that I'm working on. Give me a few days. I know I've been talking about this, but it really, really pushed here recently because of the fact that I have now the patch. I got to bring this up so you guys can see it. I now have the Whiskey Musings patch. And there it is, the Whiskey Musings logo patch on the hat. What I need to figure out is, one, how to get this done in a mass-produced form, which we're working on, and two, how to get this put onto a website or something like that for you guys to just go to and order, and I can get all of your information in a secure fashion in order to get these set up and sent out. And that's where we're at. So we're working on that. I promise I've got a team of very smart people working on that right now. In fact, my last transmission is when everybody noticed the fact that I had the patch on there. And so that's what kicked this off. So just give us a couple of weeks. Let's kind of get it figured out. All right. And then I promise I will let everybody know. All right. Now, let's see. In just the last few minutes that I've got, we have, of course, that the U.S. is seeing an across the board human capital crisis, meaning Bidenomics is not working like what Biden says it is. And this was a budget watchdog. The Committee to Unleash Prosperity put out a report that shows Biden policies cost U.S. households $10,000. Now, the thing that really caught my hand, I mean, I already know, okay, they cost us 10 grand. Woohoo. But, I mean, it's bad. Don't get me wrong. But the thing that really caught my eye is down at toward the bottom of the article or the report. Let's see, where is it? Here. So, if this is the part that really kind of spooked the stuffings out of me. All right. If Biden's regulatory costs continue to rise at their current rate, according to the report, American households can expect to lose $60,000 if Biden wins his reelection. So in other words, if he continues his policies, if he wins reelection, gets reelected back in the White House and continues his policies, we're talking about a 6-time increase of what we've already spent or already lost due to his freaking Bidenomics. Okay. If anything, people, this is the exact reason why we shouldn't vote this decrepit old fool back in the White House. It's just not going to happen. And you know what? It's not only Americans that are actually suffering. Check this out. This is from the Washington Free Beacon. Apparently, Democrat states, Democrat strongholds, I live in one of them, Democrat strongholds are seeing their tax revenues plummet. Gee, I wonder why. They're starting to lose people left and right because of their crappy ass policies when it comes to things like crime and, trying to take over for the kids and all this other stuff. So, heavily taxed blue states such as New York and California last year had some of the country's most drastic drop in tax revenue. At the same time, Republican states are enjoying the highest revenue increases, even as they keep income taxes low. So places like Florida, for example, are gaining. In the piece here from the Washington Free Beacon, under Democrat Governor Gavin Newsom, California has turned a $100 billion budget surplus into a $32 billion deficit. Yes, that's $100 billion with a B down to $32 billion underwater. Okay. This is according to Bloomberg, which is not exactly a right-leaning site. These people just don't get it. And apparently, according to the Bloomberg, it's forcing the state to trim its lofty climate change program, delay funding, and increase internal borrowing. Yeah. You know what else came out too was the whole article about reparations, which I immediately hit back and said, you have people who have never owned slaves paying people who have never been slaves in a state that never supported slavery. How does that work? Anyway. All right. So I guess in New York, they saw a similar revenue drop of almost 20%. So then both California and New York last year saw their population shrink by a whopping 294,000 residents. That's 294. That's almost 300,000 residents who have left California and New York. Illinois, New Jersey, Hawaii apparently are also reporting drops. I wouldn't be surprised if Washington was in that as well. But anyway, these Democrats, they just don't freaking get it. And speaking of Bidenomics, apparently, even though he's been pushing all of this, here's a fact check by the Washington Examiner on Biden's 2024 pitch. So the first one is that he says that my predecessor enacted the latest iteration of failed theory, tax cuts for the wealthy. It wasn't paid for, and the estimated cost of his tax cut was $2 trillion, he basically says. So this is Biden speaking. Well, the fact of the matter is the Congressional Budget Office said that the government is expected to collect more revenue over the next decade than it had projected before the tax cuts were signed into law. First of all, they didn't just help the wealthy. They actually helped a lot of them. And if you watch this program regularly, I've shown you the data. I have shown you the receipts, folks. But apparently, corporate tax revenues exceeded the CBO's projections for 2018, which was the first year after the Trump tax cuts were in effect. And it blew well past expectations in 2022 after a small dip within the pandemic or during the pandemic. So, yeah, this is okay. So another claim. We created 13.4 million new oh God, I'm not going to do this again. I've already told you. And even his intern screwed up one time with Twitter account and actually said, we've gained back 10 million jobs and gained 3 or brought up, 3 million new jobs. That was the first time that intern has actually done something smart. But anyway, let's see. Wind and solar are already significantly cheaper than coal and oil. You're not going to see anybody building a new coal-fired plant in America, not just because I'd like to pass a law to say that, but that it's too expensive, he says. Well, apparently, he's pushed, apparently, as a part of that, the Biden administration has pushed more restrictive regulations in coal and oil producers, making their cost of compliance more expensive. And that's part of the problem. Okay. The combination of pressure on coal and oil production and their handouts to green energy production have helped skew the prices. No crap. All right. Now, here's another claim. This is the last one that I'm going to do. There's a couple more in here, but this is the last one I'm going to do. Today, inflation is less than half what it was a year ago, and that inflation was caused by Russia and the war in Ukraine and by what was going on. Okay, well, I've shown graphs about this. Yes, inflation has come down, but it is still running around 4%. Before Biden took office, it was running less than 2%, right around like 1.8, 1.9. Okay. So he is claiming that inflation is coming down, which technically is true, but it's coming down from a high, a 40-year high, by the way, of right close to 9%. So yeah, it's just freaking, I mean, God, this is just horrible. I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine how these people have to spin in order to make this shit work. All right. So that, folks, is my final Whiskey Musings thought of the evening. So first of all, yes, this was a special because of what I have to do in about 28 minutes. So yes, I definitely, this is not a typical thing. We will be back at our regular scheduled programming for Saturday. However, I do have a Independence Day special on the 4th of July because Mark K is off for the entire week and he won't be streaming. I am going to take that 12 to 3 p.m. Eastern time opportunity to have an Independence Day special on the 4th of July. So do me a favor, join me at all of my outlets, noon to 3 Eastern. That's 9 to noon Pacific for my Independence Day special. It is a 3-hour special. I will be transmitting, streaming, and believe me, I'm trying to put together a full American celebration of our independence on the 4th of July. And so join me for that. And yes, Music Man pointed out, will the phones be open? I am actually considering bringing the phones up. I did it for my New Year's Eve special. I think I'm going to do it for this one. So the phones will be open. You guys can tell me what the heck you're doing for Independence Day. And of course, say whatever you want with it. It's Tuesday. It won't be whatever you want Wednesday, like what Mark does, but I'm certainly not going to censor you because that's not how we roll here on the Whiskey Musings broadcast. Also, just as a program note, I will have a Wednesday night show like normal. So if you miss the Independence Day special, join me again Wednesday night at the regular time. I will be for Tuesday, it will be noon to 3 Eastern time. And for Wednesday, I will be back at my 8 p.m. regular time as well for that. And so, we will see you Tuesday, noon to 3 for my Independence Day special. You guys all have a great rest of your weekend, and we'll see you next time on the Whiskey Musings broadcast. Good night, everybody.
The Whiskey Musings broadcast is produced by Active Eye Media, LLC. All rights reserved.